I'd like to call to order the February 8th, 2017 meeting of the Portland Development Board of Commissioners. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Cruz?
Here.
Commissioner Edlin?
Here.
Commissioner Moreland Capuya? Commissioner Myers?
Here.
Chair Kelly?
Here. Commissioner reports. Commissioner Cruz, we'll start with you.
Hi there. I think the only directly PDC-related meeting I've had is I did a call on the Startup and Small Business RFP Committee process on last Wednesday, I believe it was. So, and that seems to be going along pretty well.
Commissioner Edlin.
So just a handful of meetings with various parties around the post office site.
Okay. Commissioner Capuya. Commissioner Myers.
Attended several swearing-in ceremonies for several of the newly electeds. Attended the Portland Tram Turns 10 birthday event, and also the Portland Art Museum opening of Constructing Identity.
Other than regular meetings, I don't think I have anything to report either. So we'll go to our Executive Director, Kimberly Branham.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners. So it's been a busy month in spite of the snow and a few bumps in the road. But that does remind me, and we are trying to encourage people to continue to shop local. It's been a tough season with all the snow closures, and so I want to remind people to frequent your local businesses. We have a list at pdc.us/shoplocal if you are looking for inspiration. We've been very pleased to announce that PDC is supporting a new loan fund called Accelerate Fund with 2 X's at the beginning. The fund is designed to help women entrepreneurs raise venture capital, land traditional loans, and gain financially profitability and independence. The fund launched on January 24th. You can find more information at Accelerate Fund. Again, that's 2 X's at the beginning. .com for more information, and I'd like to thank Catherine Kroniak, PDC, for her work in helping them get off the ground. On January 26th, PDC and Travel Portland held an event aimed at connecting local small business owners of color to the tourism industry. It's an innovative partnership between PDC and Travel Portland and the Mercatus Collective, which is a PDC-sponsored online way to really broaden the stories and tell the stories of the diversity of entrepreneurs in our community. So special thanks to Pencil Footwear Design Academy for hosting this event, and to Tori Campbell here at PDC for leading events. You can find out more at Mercatus online. PDC was proud to sponsor the inaugural Super Women in Tech event, where local tech leaders told their stories. We also joined Congressman Blumenauer, Mayor Wheeler, and Commissioner Myers and many key stakeholders to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the aerial tram on the 27th. We provided about $8.5 million, PDC did, into funding, as well as a lot of technical assistance, and are really proud to have been a part of this iconic project. PDC sponsored with Hispanic Pros and Vive Northwest in support of the 2nd Annual Latino Fest on January 28th. And I'm pleased to note that City Council unanimously passed the North-Northeast Community Development Initiative Action Plan in January as well. The plan, as you well know, acknowledges the past investments in the Interstate Corridor urban renewal area and their failure to benefit existing residents and businesses in the URA's historically African-American neighborhoods, and focuses the $32 million that remain on the African-American community and others who have not benefited from the investment there, to foster multi-generational wealth and community assets. So as usual, that was a huge team effort. And so in particular, I want to thank Tori Campbell and Kim Moreland and Kate Dean. And we will be, as a next step, we will be seeking recommendations for community advisory committee members and holding a community forum in March. So Kim Moreland is the contact there. I had a chance to address a group of local investors and entrepreneurs at TiCon Northwest Conference. It was the first conference of its sort, and we were glad to have it here in Portland. I'd like to congratulate our colleague at Meyer Memorial Trust, Rukiah Adams, on being named chair of the Oregon Investment Council in early February. And finally, last week, PDC joined Mayor Wheeler and many other organizations from ERCO to Nike to Puppet to OHSU and Simple in expressing our commitment to ensuring that Portland remains a welcoming place for all people. We want to make it clear in these difficult times that we stand with New Portlanders and that we will continue to work with our partners across the city that support refugees and immigrants. So thank you to them for all the work that you do to create a healthier, more connected, and multi-ethnic society. Coming up in the month ahead, I will have an opportunity to talk to the Gateway Area Business Association about the work that's happening out there, and also help kick off PDC's new small business technical assistance provider. There was a request for interest for that, so we're getting people who are interested together and excited to see what comes from those proposals. We'll also be attending the Mercari ribbon cutting with Mayor Wheeler on February 13th. They're a Japanese resale app with its headquarters in San Francisco, and the customer service office is located at Southwest 2nd and Taylor. And finally, we'll be attending the Emerging Leaders Internship Company kickoff on February 15th. So ELI, matches underrepresented college students, so first-generation students, low-income students, and students of colors with paid internships at top local companies. Companies who are interested or students who are interested can learn more at emergingleadersinternship.org. So that's what we've got.
Thank you. We have minutes for the January 18th meeting to be approved.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Motion carries. Public comment. We have one individual, Mary Ann Schwab, who would like to take her time to say a few words.
I'm going to talk really fast.
Well, you know the 3-minute rule and all that, Mary Ann, right?
Reason I talk really fast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
For the record, my name is Mary Ann Schwab, and good afternoon, PDC Commissioners and Chair Kelly. I'm here today because I care about kids. We build our communities, present and future, through our kids. We play together, we grow together for healthier bodies and minds, and it's a proven fact. We're here today regarding your PDC budget. And I need to I'm going to be begging you to not spend it. I want you to not transfer it to housing or other projects. We have $985,000 in queue left over from the $5.4 million we spent, PDC spent TIF, for 4.5 acres at Washington High School site when it closed back in 2004. And we've already been to City Council. Linda Nedekoven was there, as was Jip Cole, and their testimony is in your packet. So I'll continue here. Number one, Portland Public Schools and Parks, their memorandum of understanding expires May 2017. My ask is that it be extended 5 years, giving Parks Commissioner time to seek a bond in 2020 to construct the Washington Recreation Center in queue pending available resources for the past 25 years. This memorandum of understanding was dated May 29th, 2012, and was incorporated in a resolution 36929 and adopted under ordinance 185561. It expires May 29th, 2017. In order to purchase this 1.31 acres, funding for the community center must be secured first. Also, we're hoping to fund the bond and purchase 1.31 acres. That's what's tying up this property. This 1.31 acres in the public ownership for decades, and once we lose it, we'll never get it back. In the area slated for aggressive residential development, the need to preserve open space and build our long-planned community center is more urgent than ever. The City Council approved spending, I'm repeating, the TIF money for $5.4 million for 4.5 acres left in queue with PDC is $985,000, also due to expire June 2017. That's my passion. I've worked on this project since the school closed, and please, please, if we could just extend that expiration date, that would be most helpful. HAND remains also concerned that $400,000 remaining from the sale of a former park site near the Hawthorne Bridge, previously known as the Crescent Park, remains in the PDCQ designated as parks open space until PPR and HAND can devise a means to create a park or open space in the HAND portion of the central east side. To extend the PDC 945 another 5 years, until we can locate resources and time to put a bond to the voters, we'd really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to come down and speak with us.
Our neighborhoods are in shambles. There's so much construction going on. The kids need their open space, and kids have no voice in this. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we are going to adjourn the PDC meeting for a short period of time and convene the Portland Community Investment Fund Governing Board meeting, the initial meeting.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners, Executive Director Branham. I'm Justin Douglas, Policy Manager. I'm pleased to be joined with Bob Betcone, Associate General Counsel. We are here today to brief you on where PDC is in the process of our quest to apply for and receive new market tax credits, and then more specifically, to have you as individuals serving on the Portland Community Investment Fund Governing Board to take actions to continue to move this forward. So I'm going to talk through the update, and then I'll turn it over to Bob, who will walk you through the actions necessary to continue to move this forward. Just briefly, the structure of the presentation today, I'm just going to remind you what the background is for this effort. You have seen some of this before, but for the folks who are watching today's video online or on TV later on, this will be helpful to explain to them what the context of today's action is. Briefly talk about the program overview, the projects where we might be able to invest these new markets tax credits, remind you of a map of those census tracts in the city of Portland that are considered eligible, and then we'll dive into the roles and responsibilities for both the governing board and the advisory board for the Portland Community Investment Fund. We'll share you the list of the current members. I'll talk about next steps, and then again, Bob will walk you through the rest of the process. In June of 2016, staff briefed the board on the status of the PDC long-term business plan. At that point, it was a 50% draft. And one of the priorities noted in the business plan was to explore creation of what's known as a community development entity. This is a legal vehicle that would be recognized by the federal government as being eligible for applying for and receiving new market tax credits. And the reason that it was listed in the business plan is that it presents a unique opportunity for PDC to identify resources to invest in eligible projects across the city. We could both invest in certain urban renewal areas where it could help leverage Portland's PDC's tax increment financing dollars, but equally, if not more important, we can invest it outside of urban renewal areas in qualifying census tracts. We also heard, want to focus this community development entity or the Portland Community Investment Fund exclusively on Portland and projects within the city of Portland. So in October, on the October 12th of 2016, the PDC board directed staff to create a community development entity, and this is now the PCIF. We want to let you know where we are in that process and the next steps to move it forward. So the tax credit program, as I mentioned, is designed to encourage investment in low-income communities. One update since October was that the U.S. Department of Treasury announced their 2015-16 awards. There, as you can see on the screen, there were 120 awards across the country, totaling approximately $7 billion. There were 2 community development entities that are located within the city of Portland who received allocations. Neither of them have a focus area that's exclusively Portland. The PCIF, as we have formed it, will be eligible to apply for an allocation of credits. And one of the things that we need to be clear about today is how we maintain accountability to Portland low-income communities by having a governing board, which is you all, and an advisory board. This is a list of typically eligible new market tax credit projects. You see that they are typically community serving uses, commercial uses. They can sometimes include residential uses, but those tend to only be in projects that are substantially commercial in nature if they're mixed use projects. I alluded to the eligible census tracts. This is a map of the city of Portland. If you'll see the purple outlined areas are the city of Portland's urban renewal areas. And then the dark gray areas on the map here are the census tracts that are recognized by the federal government as what they call low-income communities, or those that would be eligible for receiving new market tax credits. So as you'll see from the map, there is a smattering of census tracts in downtown and on the inner east side, but the majority of them are in outer east, northeast, and southeast Portland. I also noted before that sometimes the urban renewal areas and the low-income census tracts coincide. So for example, in Gateway and Lentz, those boundaries are one and the same. And I also note that with our 6 Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative districts, most of them qualify as low-income communities and would be eligible for a new market tax credit project. So the roles and responsibilities, we wanted to make this clear today, and Bob is going to talk more about the column on the left, the governing board's responsibilities. In short, the governing board is responsible for general management and control of the Portland Community Investment Fund. The type of actions that you're going to take today are the kind of the legal actions that are required to make sure that this vehicle is eligible to apply for credits. Another action that Bob will talk you through is appointing the initial advisory board. We will be coming back to the governing board, what we expect at some point this summer, and you would actually formally approve the application for the new market tax credits. And then should the PCIF be awarded credits, you would then formally approve which of the projects that are listed in the application would be those towards which we would dedicate the new market tax credit allocation. The advisory board, you'll see on the right-hand column, we will be working very closely with them over the next couple of months. One of the things that the advisory board will help us to do is to identify projects that we can include in the application. The folks on the advisory board represent communities across the city of Portland, and while we have a decent sense of projects that might be eligible, they will really help us understand other projects that we might not be aware of. The advisory board also will help represent Portland's low-income communities. Again, this is a requirement in the program, and the constituency of the advisory board will help meet that criteria. In addition to providing input on the projects, the advisory board is also going to help articulate why would we invest in these projects? What are the outcomes from investing new market tax credits in these projects? And then finally, they would, if the PCIF is awarded an allocation, they would make a recommendation to you as the governing board as to which projects to fund. But again, that would be the governing board's ultimate responsibility. This is the current list of the advisory board members. There are 7 individuals, and we're really pleased that they've agreed to participate. We expect that we will be convening about 3 meetings with them over the course of the next 6 to 9 months. Rowan and Nathan Kennedy from Malden Capital, and Colin and Nathan will be assisting PDC in drafting the application, which is a significant undertaking. Colin is here today, and he would be happy to answer any specific questions that you might have about the new market tax credit program or the application or other things that, that staff might not be able to handle. We expect the application drafting process to take several months from March until June. And then, again, we would come back to the governing board this summer to approve the application. If all goes according to plan, and we're fortunate enough To receive an award of tax credits, we would likely be notified by probably November, maybe December of this calendar year. So before I turn it over to Bob, I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I mentioned Colin is also here in the audience. If you had any questions for him, you can also call him up later if you'd like.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Could you maybe just give us a flavor for the kinds of projects that you think might be funded through this mechanism? I know it's early, obviously the advisory board hasn't even met yet, but just the kinds of things, and if there are things that are already sort of teed up that you think the community really wants to see funded, those might be interesting to hear about just for a moment too.
Commissioner, that's something we're really going to be digging into over the next couple of months, but I will say that the three main criteria will be, one, projects that do fall within those low-income communities, so they have to fall within those communities to be eligible. Two, that they are primarily commercial and community serving. And three, they would likely need to be projects that we expect to be breaking ground at some point in 2018 or 19. So with those three high-level parameters, we expect it to winnow down the list of potential projects across the city. Okay, I'll turn it over to Bob, and he'll walk through the next steps.
Did you mention that those pictures are all of... Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Bob Bedcone, Assistant General Counsel, PDC. Justin has the fun, colorful slides, and as the lawyer, I will have the more mundane matters, but we will move through them as quickly as we can. This is the formative entity, the Portland Community Investment Fund. Your affirmation here today, it should be noted for the record, is in your individual capacity and not as a representative PDC. And we make this point in part because our CDE, which is the Portland Community Investment Fund, the program necessitates some separateness. We can't have a public agency undertaking this role. So we make a point of that on the record here today. So please let the record show that in attendance today we have Mr. Gustavo Cruz, Mr. William Myers, Mr. Tom Kelly, Mr. Mark Elan, and Dr. Alicia Moreland-Capulla. I'll ask you all now in the collective if you are each willing to assume the duty of director of the governing board of the Portland Community Investment Fund.
Yes.
Yes. Very good. Very good. Sir. Sir. That's correct.
And so how logistically will that work? Technically, we are still operating in the context of PDC.
Well, what will happen is that, as we have done today, we will, in the future, when the board meets, when the Portland Community Investment Fund Board of Directors meets, we will adjourn the PDC Board of Commissioners. So you will effectively take your hat off as a PDC public official, and we okay. So then, please let the record show that all the members in attendance here today did affirm their willingness to become directors of the board, and so I would like to say congratulations. We now have a new board of directors of PCIF. The next matter is to elect a chair of the board of the directors board in favor of the appointment, and congratulations, Chair Cruz. The next set of actions will appoint officers of the corporation. Kimberly Branham is willing to serve as the president. Faye Brown is willing to serve as the chief operating officer and chief financial officer, and I'm willing to serve as a secretary and general counsel. The action today will also appoint the membership of the advisory board, which Justin reviewed with you a few moments ago. Are there any questions regarding the appointment of the officers or the advisory board members? All right, very good. The next item is a set of matters. They are the approval of a professional services agreement and the delegation of authority to the president. The professional services agreement is intended to obtain support to benefit Portland Community Investment Fund as it seeks the tax allocation credit. and hopefully also as it employs those funds to projects. The PDC will be the entity supplying these services. So the PDC Professional Services Agreement would secure administrative support necessary to conduct such functions as general management, accounting, reporting, loan servicing, and a number of other functions as needed. In particular, this contract will allow PDC staff to manage the application process and to help manage the consultant Malden Capital, which Justin had discussed a moment ago. The cost to PCIF of this service is the actual and fully loaded cost to PDC, and reimbursement of those costs back to PDC will be deferred until the time that PCIF earns any fees as a part of its role in the new market tax credit structure. So it's PDC will essentially front those costs, and at the time that we move through the process and some fees are earned, PDC will be paid back. And there's more details in your packet. We're going to apply a 5% cost of money, simple compound for the period it takes until the repayment is had. The professional services agreement and President's expenditure authority are estimated to cover costs and activities up to the time of an allocation award. At that time, we would have to see if there is award, we will do new assumptions and new estimates on what it will cost to move forward. But of course, that would be in the context of earning fees. So are there any questions regarding the professional services agreement or the authority that we would be granting to the President? No questions, we'll move on. The final part of the resolution today before you will authorize applications for the federal nonprofit status, CD certification, and creation of 2 limited liability corporations. Nonprofit status at the federal level will complement our state nonprofit status. It will also complement the charitable focus of the new corporation. The authority to apply for CDE certification, that's Community Development Entity certification, is simply the next step in the new market tax credit process and is a way for the federal program to recognize that the steps that we're taking today have been properly taken and the entity that we have formed is an eligible one to seek the tax credits. If a tax credit award is made to PCIF, then the new market tax credit program necessitates that funding of projects be through subsidiary LLCs. Project LLCs also have to be certified by the program, so what we're doing today is trying to get ahead of what could be a wait in line to certify those LLCs that was recommended to us. We think that these LLCs would do nothing but sit on the shelf until the time that we receive award, and then additional authorities would be sought from you to activate those LLCs to fund particular projects that you approve. Are there any questions regarding the nonprofit application or the certification application or the forming of these 2 LLCs?
Why are there 2?
Well, we thought 1 was a little light and 3 was too many. It was recommended that we have more than 1, so we thought 2 was about right for now. If we needed to create a 3rd, we could do so at a future point in time. But we would at least have 2 ready to go.
All right, thanks.
Now that concludes my summary of action descriptions. And again, as Justin has indicated, we do have Colin Rowan with Malden Capital available to you, and Justin and I are both also available to answer questions.
Hearing no questions, at this time, we will invite any public comment on the potential actions before the board. No public comment? Okay. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 1 of the Portland Community Investment Fund.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, all votes in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Resolution 1 of the Portland Community Investment Fund carries with unanimous vote. Mr. Betcone, is there anything further?
No, there's nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. At this time, we will adjourn the first meeting of the Governing Board of the Portland Community Investment Fund.
I have to say that
So fun to use the gavel.
pretty excited about this. I served on a Citizens Advisory Committee for New Market Tax Credits. I guess I'm still on one. Colin knows this for the last 15 years or so. But this can be a powerful tool in our toolkit going forward. I am reconvening the board meeting of the Portland Development Commission. See, our next item on the agenda is an information item. It's item number 7, Report 17-05, an update on the South Waterfront North District DA implementation. Geraldine?
Hello, I'm Geraldine Moyle with the Development and Investment Team, and together with representatives from ZRZ and OHSU, we are here to give you an update on the implementation of the South Waterfront North District Development Agreement. I will provide a brief overview of the work the collective partnership has been working on since our last briefing in 2015. ZRZ will present their Zidell Yards master plan, and OHSU will present an update on the Knight Cancer Research Building and the Snitcher campus. The North District Development Agreement was approved by the PDC Board and City Council in 2015. At 30 acres, the ZRZ property is the largest parcel of vacant redevelopable land in Portland Central City, and development on their property is significant to the city being able to house both job and housing projections, including approximately 200 units of affordable housing in the district. Leveraging the city investment in the Central District and the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail, the infrastructure included in the agreement, the streets, the greenway, and the future open space further expands the regional public assets in the district. And Bond Street provides access into and out of the district while also serving as access to OHSU's growing research and outpatient services in the district, and in particular, the Knight Cancer Research Building. And finally, the DA mandates that all private development comply with PDC's Business and Workforce Equity Program requirements. These are important programs by which PDC is able to support women and people of color businesses and tradespeople. With the execution of the DA in 2015, many milestones of the development agreement and affiliated projects have occurred. So the DA was signed in July. The Orange Line, the streetcar closed the loop, and the Tillicum Bridge opened in September of 2015. We signed intergovernmental agreements obligating the city bureaus into the development agreement in November of 2015. PHB and ZRZ reached an agreement on an appraised value for an affordable housing option. We completed 30% full alignment design of Bond Avenue and interim full design for the North of Porter segment. And you saw that in August of last year. The surcharge and the wall contract is currently out to bid. There's a public-private solution for district stormwater in process. And in regards to district energy, with BPS, PDC, and ZRZ, it was determined that the building systems for buildings on the Zidell property would equally meet the energy efficiency of a district system. The open space partnership between Zidell and Portland Parks and Rec was initiated, and it's important to note that was initiated ahead of the schedule in the DA. The DA said we should reach that or initiate that by 2018. With the initiation of Zidell's master plan, we were able to advance that open space partnership. And in conjunction with that, we were also able to advance a Greenway master plan update. And finally, construction has started on OHSU's Knight Cancer Research Building. It's also important to point out that while the city and OHSU were making progress, Zidell was also making progress, and that's one of the reasons we're here today to give you an update. Since signing the development agreement, Zidell has hired a director of development. They hired Sasaki and West 8 to complete a detailed master plan. They again initiated the open space partnership with Portland Parks and Rec and a subsequent Greenway master plan update. In September, they announced the last barge construction for May of 2017. They initiated barge business cleanup, and they are currently pursuing phase 1 tenants for their master plan. So given all of this and expecting the completion of the master plan in this year, PDC and ZRZ also extended the deadline for Phase 1 private development in the development agreement. And we did that to allow Zidell to complete their master plan, and then to allow both parties, PDC on behalf of the city and Zidell, to consider amendments to the DA that would more closely align private development and public infrastructure. And I think that will make more sense once you've seen their master plan. So with that, Zidell will now present their master plan, followed by Brian Newman of OHSU, who will present an update on the Knight Cancer Research Building. And then I will come back up and present some next steps for the overall group for 2017. So I'd like to turn the presentation over to Jay Zidell and Charlene Zidell, who will introduce the Zidell Yards master plan and their team.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I think we're going to begin by advancing the slide once and start with a video before some remarks.
If you can tell us who you are before we get started, that'd be great.
Sure, I'll let you begin.
Jay Zidell, president of the Zidell Companies.
Charlene Zidell.
I'm Bree Hensold. I'm a planner at Sasaki Associates, part of the master plan team.
Thank you.
It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. The best way to make sure that my dad would do something would be to tell him that he couldn't do it. And that would just about guarantee that he would.
The Zidell family has the longest continuous association with South Waterfront of any other entity in Portland.
We've been in the pipe fitting business, we've been in the valve business, we've been in the barge building business, the ship dismantling business. Environmental remediation is a business we do not know.
This property has been the lifeblood of this family for 100 years, and you don't give that away.
We contributed to the contaminants on the site, and it was our obligation to deal with it. So we got in and did what we needed to do.
In ship dismantling, you're taking a nice, orderly ship and you're tearing it apart.
We had scrap piles that almost were reaching the Ross Island Bridge, you know, and lots of them here. There was scrap everywhere down there. It's like a mountain. You can't just spread it out 2 feet high. So what do? You go up.
Zidell, it was mostly a chemical called PCBs. They're persistent chemicals. Once they're in the environment, they don't break down.
We had to protect human health, and we had to protect the environment. That's the goal of the remediation project. How do you do that? It's a challenge.
We were in a no-fail mission. It was 24 hours a day.
Ultimate remedy that was decided on that we would be designing was a 7th cap.
The cap was something that hadn't been done before to this magnitude in this river.
The result is an incredible riverbank. It just keeps getting better year after year after year, getting denser and taller, and lots of habitat in here for fish and wildlife. I think it's the best riverbank in the city of Portland.
It was an important project for the river, it was an important project for the community, and it was a really important project for the family.
We couldn't have developed the property without the remediation.
I don't see this as a redevelopment. What's happening down here is all new. The streets are new, the parks are new, the buildings are new, the bridge is new, the trams are new, everything's new.
We really want to create a culture down here. And to do that, you have to be really intentional.
The whole Zidell family sees the redevelopment as a legacy project. They want to do it the right way.
It's an opportunity to shape the city and to give back, to create these public spaces.
I want to rent a building to institutions that are going to create innovation and solve some of the world's problems.
I think it'll represent the next generation of Portland.
When I think about the Zidell way, the first thing that comes to mind is simply doing what we say we're going to do.
It's important to give back because it's who we are.
Well done.
Thank you very much. You should see the rest of it. I want to thank you for having our family and our team here today to share with you some of our history as well as our aspirations for our property. Our companies first occupied part of the site starting as far back as 88 years ago, and over the next 25 years, acquired parcels so that today we own 33 contiguous acres. Shortly after my father returned from the service, our father returned from the service during World War II, he founded a ship dismantling enterprise, one of the original industrial recycling businesses in Portland. Over the course of the next 30 years, there would be in excess of 1,000 individuals who would be employed at the site dismantling over 300 ships, processing both ferrous and non-ferrous scrap, manufacturing carbon steel pipe fittings for the energy sector, building the area's first steel barges, and a variety of other industrial activities. And while unknown to us at the time, some of these activities, along with others that preceded our use of the property, left certain environmental contaminants on the site that needed to be dealt with. Once brought to our attention, we joined the DEQ's voluntary cleanup program and then spent the next 20 years investigating and remediating the site, which has now been largely completed. 15 years ago, with the assistance of ZGF, the family created a vision statement intended to guide the future development of the site that has become the spiritual, intellectual, and financial heart of the various Zidell enterprises. I would like to read but a small part of that document. It should not be surprising then to anyone within the family that this property is not considered as just an asset to be maximized in value. As the historical and current day heart of the Zidell enterprises, it is collectively the family's desire that this property be treated and viewed as something special, with the opportunity for all of Portland to gain from its careful, thoughtful, and creative redevelopment. This will become the yardstick by which the family will measure our progress and success in attaining our goals and aspirations. We are here before you today because we are now ready to start that transformation. We have put together a terrific team that over the past 8 months have been developing a most compelling plan for our property. Finally, on September 21st, after considerable thought and angst, I announced that after 55 years of building barges at our site, the current project will be the last barge we will be building here, which clears the pathway for us to move forward on this most exciting journey. I would now like to turn to my sister Charlene for her comments.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, commissioners. I am thrilled to be here today on behalf of our family and our family history. I believe this project is different than others because it involves a long-time family business asset being developed by the family with the intention of being held by the family. It is an incredible opportunity and a daunting responsibility. It is our legacy. Our vision includes more than designing and constructing a mixed-use district with residential, retail, office, and open spaces. It also includes developing and nurturing the heart and soul, the spirituality and intelligence of the district. It's about becoming the connective tissue that binds the community together, that seamlessly connects Zidell Yards with the OHSU campus and South Waterfront, as well as the Central East Side, OMSI, PCC, the Opera, and the IQ. This fluidity will integrate and enhance the maximum potential of all of our geographic neighbors. Our goal is the who and the what of our tenants will promote job growth, will contribute significantly to the economy of Portland and the state of Oregon, will create social change, and improve individual and community health and wellness. Our programmatic vision has 3 tenets. to build out the health ecosystem in the broadest sense of the definition, leveraging all the existing assets to promote research and development, innovation, incubators, VCs, academic research, and private industry. To incorporate arts and culture into the fabric of the community in a way that is accessible to all and becomes a part of daily life. And to create, through intention and design, an urban community in which the physical and social environments allow for and encourage individuals to make choices and create patterns for healthy living and wellness. It is with great pride, enthusiasm, and excitement that we share with you the master plan for the next South Waterfront community, Zidell Yards.
Thank you. And now Phil Beil is going to join as we talk about some of the details of that vision that Jay and Charlene have started to frame out. And Dina Alexander as well.
If I could just offer an introductory remark. I'm Phil Beil with GBD Architects. We've been part of the design team in a support capacity from the initiation of Sazaki's work. I think in part because we have a pretty strong investment from a design capacity in the district so far. We've been fortunate to be involved in 6 out of the 12 buildings that have been done so far in the district, so we have a pretty good understanding of the challenges and opportunities, opportunities made and opportunities lost. And so we're asked to join the design team in a capacity that doesn't try and quell any of the ideas that might come from aspirations from a land far away, but instead applies the Portland filter to it to make sure that this is ultimately a project that Portland can embrace and truly love and expect to be part of Portland and be truly Portland in every capacity. I have to tell you, it's really, really good work. We are very, very anxious to share this with you. It's aspirational, but it's realistic. It does a lot of the things that so far we haven't been able to accomplish in the rest of the district. It touches the water in unique ways. It creates a network of open spaces stitched in with some of the highest densities that the city has ever seen or will ever see. And probably my favorite piece is that saves probably the only piece of landmark structure in the entire South Waterfront District and makes it sort of the key and heart of what will be the commercial heart of the entire district. So let's show it to you, and hopefully you'll be as excited as we are about it.
Thanks, Phil. That was an excellent introduction, and so I'm going to jump into talking a little bit about the plan. The site, as you know, is located at a really incredible spot within the city at a great sort of bend along the Willamette River. We saw that as another one of those opportunities that Phil mentioned. It's also really flanked in sort of an exciting context when it comes to uses adjacent to the growing OHSU Schnitzer campus, as well as the kind of evolving Central District neighborhoods. So we saw this as a really incredible place that offers great views, great neighbors, and a real kind of table that was already set when we arrived. In many ways, with those ingredients, you could see that this could perhaps be an easy project to do a development here. But as you heard from Jay and Charlene, I think the aspirations of the family are so high and the long-term goals are so important around their legacy. So we tried to be really faithful to that and to do something very special for the city. At the beginning of the process, we laid out a set of master plan principles, and I'm not going to read through all of these, but they really kind of ranged from the strategic and visionary around how the site relates to the river in a new way and gives this kind of human access that is perhaps different than other places across the city. It also kind of brought us down to being responsible to the technical details of parking, environmental constraints, program, and stormwater. So we're always trying to kind of keep our eye on both vision and implementation. With that kind of set of principles, we've come up with what we think is a really exciting mixed-use neighborhood for the South Waterfront. And if you look at it here in this context, you can see how the district knits into what's imagined for the Schnitzer campus to the north, the new kind of larger scale campus setting, as well as into the kind of residential fabric of the Central District to the south. So we saw this as a really important kind of mixing pot for both of those things coming together, both physically as well as in terms of use. I think at this scale, you can also importantly see the strong role of public space and parks in the neighborhood in the future, and how kind of 3 significant park spaces as well as the greenway really do a lot to link the neighborhood directly into the river. I want to take a little bit of a closer look now and walk you through some of those key moves. I think Phil alluded to one of the most important and fundamental urban design moves of the master plan, and that was the idea to save and adaptively reuse the barge building, which is an incredible scale building and something that really represents that history and legacy. So at the very beginning, there was a commitment to save that, reuse it, rethink it, perhaps as kind of a new heart for the district, one that would be active, a retail destination, and that could really define Zidell Yards. That also really set up some of the physical parameters of the site, with the front door of the new barge building on Bond Street. It set up the street grid that we then continued to follow through. We also really built on some significant infrastructure on the site. It's traversed by the Ross Island Bridge, really fortunate to be adjacent to the amazing new Tillicum Crossing. And so the street grid and the development sites related strongly to the barge building dimension as well as to those bridges that cross through it. There's some things you can't see on this slide, and you saw those a little bit in the video that we saw, the environmental constraints. And so this is a plan that really takes all of that technical rigor into consideration as it thinks about underground parking, stormwater, where the parks are, where the streets are. So all of that has been kind of integrated into the vision. And then finally on this slide, I want to point out, I think, a little bit about scale and massing. And so you can see we have along Moody 3 kind of major development parcels. Here is Bond coming through, tying into OHSU and the Central District. And as we get to the waterfront, it changes a little bit and becomes much more of kind of a smaller scale building fabric. The idea is to have at the waterfront a human scale, retails and restaurants, a place that's very accessible and oriented to people. Ultimately, the site imagines about 4 million square feet of development without parking. That's about a little more than 2 million square feet of residential, 200,000 square feet of retail, which includes that renovated barge building for an anchor retail destination, as well as a new grocery store that you can see right here in a prominent location. This is Bond, and Moody would be on the other side. And then there's about 1.5 million square feet of office. So a healthy neighborhood, but also a mix of uses. You can see how that program plays out in a little bit more detail. This is the ground level program specifically. So here we have the barge building with the retail anchor, a grocer, which is situated right between Moody and Bond at a really prominent gateway to the neighborhood. Bond, you can see, becomes an important retail spine. So it's meant to be lined the whole way through the neighborhood with retail. And then there's kind of more on the north side, north of Ross Island Bridge. We imagine that as a little bit more of a neighborhood complement to the very active area around the barge building. Townhomes, residential towers near the water, and the idea that you could have a little bit of a quieter residential neighborhood within that district. You can see also some of the uses that are imagined for those smaller scale buildings on the water. Restaurants, retail, everything that's sort of active on both sides, onto the Willamette as well as onto River Parkway. If we look at a view of what that might be like as an experience, here we are on the aerial tram, looking down over an area that we call Gantry Plaza. That's the location today that's right at the gateway. It's a really important crossroads into the district. And you can see that there's been this kind of preservation of a view corridor looking out to the Willamette River over a park we call Heritage Park. I'll tell you more about those in a moment. You're looking at the renovated barge building, which becomes more transparent so you can see the activity inside and it can engage with the neighborhood. And then the groceries and some of the scale of the development imagined above. I'll walk you a little bit now through the public realm, which is a really important part of this project. We see it as sort of a framework for the development around it. Ultimately, you know, at full design, the master plan imagines 6.5 acres of publicly accessible park space, 6.5 acres of greenway along the river's edge, and then 4.5 acres of private open space in rooftop gardens as part of the development. And so you can see how that adds a really significant amount of open space to this new neighborhood. As we thought about the open space system and the overall framework, we were very inspired by Portland's legacy of open space, the Portland sequence, the history of planning that you have, and that plays out in the Pearl as well as in downtown. And so we saw the opportunity here to have a series of open spaces, each with a distinct, distinct character, distinct identity that could, in the same way that your other open spaces in the city do this, give definition and life to different parts of Zidell Yards. So I'll show you in more detail each of these different spaces. Here we have Heritage Park opening onto the water. It engages with the slipway, which is a really kind of unique amenity that steps down like a terrace into the water today. That would be retained and reused for human access in the future. That links right into Gantry Plaza, which is adjacent to that grocery store. Underneath the Ross Island Bridge, we imagine a very unique type of public space, one that could be about active recreation, courts, stormwater management, all within that kind of very impressive and industrial space under the Ross Island Bridge. And then finally to the north, the Meadow Park, a quieter neighborhood park where you might go to walk a dog or to play. So here's Heritage Park. It's a large, flexible, open lawn, and then on the water's edge, the slipway steps down, so you can take kayaks right into the water. And you can see the strong relationship here between the barge building and that Heritage Park, how the kayaks or canoes could go right in. Here we're looking at Gantry Plaza. This is sort of imagined to be a festival plaza or market plaza. It could be programmed actively throughout the year for farmers markets, different festivals, but also used on any informal day by the grocer or by restaurants. And here we are on the ground within that Gantry Plaza, so you get the sense of place and how it's really a gateway and a crossroads for the district, designed around the tram and meant to sort of celebrate that feature. Down the center seam of the district, we have Bridge Park, and I think the best view to see it is really here. So you could imagine that this is a pretty kind of urban type of space. We see it as, you know, this is a place that will do a lot of work for the district, a lot of service, a lot of loading into parking garages, but also a very cool place to have courts, active recreation, and of course to manage a lot of stormwater. And then moving to the north, Meadow Park. One of the important things about this space is that it helps to kind of navigate the streets and how Bond kind of curves through the district, but it also is a real opening onto the river, and I think a real celebration of the views to the Tillicum Bridge. And so you can see if you're in that park, you're surrounded by residential, so it has a nice character, active edges, and townhomes, but very quiet and well connected to the riverfront. And then finally, at the end, we just want to come back and look at the water's edge again, which is one of the things that makes this district so special. So down at the kind of terminus of Heritage Park, here we are with that slipway coming down, redesigned for easy ways for people to get into the water. Perhaps the idea of a dock, a place that you could occupy, and that could be designed in a lot of different ways. And that would connect right into the Greenway system, so it would be a really kind of important node along that Greenway corridor. We're here on the northern side of the district in the Greenway, so the idea is that the development all relates really closely to that Greenway open space, but it's still a linear circulation corridor. And then towards the south, which is that kind of the liveliest hub of the district, you might have plazas, restaurants that spill out and engage with that greenway open space. So it's a little bit of a differentiated experience as you move throughout the district. And then finally, I just want to reflect a little bit on the process that developed this master plan over the past 8 months or 10 months now. It was a really engaged process with the city and ZRZ and our team, as well as GBD, Place, and other local Portland filters. So we met every month with PDC and with bureaus to get input, showing them very early on and kind of live what the ideas were. Those changed over time, and I think they gave us really direct and honest feedback all the way through. So that's been really helpful to get us where we are. We've also been going through the open space concept planning process and the greenway process with parks. There's been a lot of outreach as well to other community members, barge tours, happy hours in the neighborhood where we gave updates, different meetings, and a lot of engagement directly with neighbors and with OHSU, as well as council and staff. So a lot of input that I think has made that into the richer picture of Zidell Yards.
We might just quickly mention that we presented the same presentation to Design Commission in a briefing format last week. Got a lot of thumbs up, a lot of compliments for it. The direction to us was, well, go build it. The city bureaus were there, the city bureaus along with the design team. We've got obviously several nits and pieces that have to be resolved relative to exact street alignments, final location of streetcar, things like that. But for the most part, we are well down the road in resolving issues that might be contentious and otherwise keep the project from moving forward. So we're very close to being ready to go.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions, comments?
I have just a few remarks. I'm sorry,
sure, I'm sorry.
Chair. Thank you for letting us be here. I'm Dina Alexander, as Bree mentioned. I'm with Rather White Parks and Alexander, outside real estate counsel to the ZRZ team. And I wanted just to make a few remarks about giving you a little bit of insight to our next steps. We, one, want to acknowledge and express our appreciation to both PDC staff and to Bureau staff and their continued work with us on this project. We know that PDC and the city have been working on this site for a very long time. And ZRZ recognized the benefit of having a master plan for this 30-plus acre parcel and what that would mean in terms of developing a cohesive vision for the development of the site and acting as a guide for us as we move forward to redevelop the site. And there was a fundamental driver that was mentioned in that master planning process, which was the decision by the family to cease the barge operations and to retain the barge building on the site. And that made the southern part of Zidell Yards become the heart of the district, as was previously mentioned, the focal point of the heritage of the site, and really important to the legacy for the family. And that has shifted things for us from development beginning in the northern part of the yards, which is what the current development agreement contemplates, and moving to the south, and flip that on its head, and now puts our focal point on the south and the development happening there first, and then moving to the north. We acknowledge that that is a significant change. We acknowledge that it requires different timing than what is currently contemplated, both in terms of public and private realm. We also know that as spectacular as this vision is, that we need to work with PDC and with the city on how we implement it and how we fund it and finance it. And what I want you to know is we have already begun that work in earnest. We've had discussions with PDC staff about it. We are in the midst of numbers that look at tax increment and do that analysis based on things like inclusionary zoning and construction excise tax and things that are new for all of us in Portland, and that we will be prepared in the very near future to have more detailed discussions with PDC staff on that front.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, I applaud your vision and think it's very impressive. So thanks very much for your presentation.
I'd have to agree with Phil. It is great work. And I'd also say that the wait was worth it. I guess a couple other thoughts I think we'd be remiss without saying, and that is thank you to you and your family for what I'm imagining are the thousands of jobs that you created over the years, the business risks that you took to make Portland better. Thanks for the cleanup, and really looking forward to watching this go forward. You do have a great team, and it is great work. Thank you.
Commissioners? Commissioner Myers?
Echo what has already been said, and hope that all the different buildings, really stand up and present a legacy for the Zidell family. That's been a legacy to our city for years. So,
Commissioner? I just have to echo what Mark said and everyone else is saying, that this is a really great and exciting project, and we obviously will have to work out all the dollars as they come along, but for the moment, I just hope it gets done in time so I can experience it before I get too old.
We're with you on that.
I think we have Brian Newman from OHSU to come up and spend a few minutes talking to us about this very district.
Chair Kelly, members of the commission, how are you doing? It's good to be here. Brian Newman, Vice President of Campus Development at Oregon Health and Science University. I was asked to give a brief presentation about the work that we're doing on the Schnitzer campus at the north end of the district. But I do want to say that we're thrilled with the master plan that has been developed by the Zidells, and you may recall that when the Schnitzer family gave the land for the Schnitzer campus to OHSU, there was a lot of interest and effort within OHSU. I'm not so sure how far outside the campus it got, about doing some kind of land swap so we can get all of our land contiguous in one space instead of having two areas separated by the Zidell property. And that didn't come to pass for a lot of reasons I won't get into. But in retrospect, honestly, from my perspective, I'm so glad that never did happen, because the energy and the activity of the mixed-use vision that the Zidells have is such a wonderful complement to the institutional growth that we are going to be doing over the next 10, 20, 30 years at OHSU, and it'll create a much more authentic place in South Waterfront that I think over time will be much better than if OHSU had just one large campus. So we're excited. We appreciate all the outreach they have done to include us in their planning, and we're really interested in working with them on an ongoing basis to implement this larger vision for both our campus as well as Zidell Yards. So I'll just take a few minutes of your time to give you a quick update on where we are with the Schnitzer campus. Here is our master plan. I've done a master plan presentation here in the past, and so I won't go into the details. But as you know, we opened the Collaborative Life Sciences building in 2014, the summer of 2014, and we have the Knight Cancer Research Building, which is referred to there on the map as KCRB, under construction. All those other sites refer to Schnitzer Campus Building 4 through 9. That's all of our future growth on the Schnitzer campus that is really the home of OHSU's academic and research growth over the next 20 years. And so we still have 5 more parcels to develop, as well as some open space and other features that I won't get into. But the 2 other pieces of infrastructure that we're also working on this with the city is extending Meade Street, which you see there, that now terminates right at the Collaborative Life Sciences building, all the way to future Bond. And while the city in Peabody is building Bond Street through our campus, we're doing all the environmental remediation work right now to prepare for that construction. And so I'll give you an update on that as well. So the Knight Cancer Research Building is about 330,000 square feet. It'll ultimately house about 600 researchers and about 100 staff, so 700 people altogether. It is a cutting-edge research facility where about half of that wet and dry research space is reserved for our early cancer detection initiative. And you may have read in the news that we recruited Dr. Sadek Esner from Southern California, who came up here to lead that effort. The other half of that space is reserved for all of our other existing cancer and growing cancer research initiatives that are now dispersed in about 4 or 5 other buildings that we're bringing all together in this one location. So the blue and the green and the orange is really the heart of that research activity, both with the wet lab research, the dry research, and our shared cores. And then below that on the first level is a conference center and public space for the institute, and then we have administrative offices and a social hub, if you will, or lounge for all of our researchers on the rooftop. The building will be a gorgeous addition to the landscape in South Waterfront. It'll be just on the north side of the Collaborative Life Sciences building. It's under construction right now. We have 3 cranes in South Waterfront. I won't talk about what's going on down closer to the tram, but this building, we just received permit package 2, and we're working on permit package 3, which will be our final building permit to move forward with construction. And you'll see this building top out by summer. In fact, here's real quick the summary of that timeline. We broke ground in June of last year. We'll top out in May of this year. Total project cost of that building is $190 million. Southwest Meade Street, we're building. So we're putting about $6.5 million into infrastructure. We're building Meade Street, and that will begin later this month, and will complete by the time the Knight Cancer Research Building opens. And then we're already underway with the environmental remediation before we hand over the right-of-way to PBOT to construct Bond Avenue, which will be $3 million. And so we are really proud of the work we do in hand with the city, aligning all of our investments with infrastructure planning, partnering on a regular basis, meeting constantly, much more probably than the city staff would probably want, but we are very eager in making sure that everything we do is highly coordinated, and we greatly appreciate the good work of your staff, particularly Geraldine and Lisa, who we partner with on a regular basis. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Geraldine, you coming back up?
Go, Brian, go.
Yeah, go, Brian.
Okay, I'll go.
So we just wanted to close with many of the things you'll see over the next 12 months. There's going to be a lot of activity. OHSU's Knight Cancer Research Building and the 2 projects Brian referred to in the Central District. Zidell's Phase 1. And for the city and PDC, the continued implementation of our public obligations and goals identified in the development agreement. And those include Bond Avenue. So north of Porter, you'll see a big pile of dirt on the surcharge for most of 2017. And then with Zidell, we'll be doing the design for the segment south of Porter. There'll be a street plan amendment addressing alignment and design alterations. The open space concept plan partnership agreement will reach conclusion in regards to identifying open space locations and a direction for the acquisition, design, and construction of those public open spaces. The Greenway Master Plan update in anticipation of detailed design of Greenway segments that would occur concurrent with adjacent development. A public and private solution for district stormwater. And then finally, PDC, on behalf of the city and with our Bureau partners, we anticipate negotiating an amendment to the DA that addresses, in light of the ZRZ master plan, changes to the timing of public infrastructure and the funding of that infrastructure, given our current commitments in the North Macadam URA and the updates on projected funding generated by the Zidell master plan. So you may, I would suspect you will see us at the end of the year with a development agreement amendment to come before you with that.
Any further questions for Geraldine?
I just have a comment. First of all, thank both you and Lisa for the great work.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we have limited funds down here in the district, as we do in all districts, but I think as we go down the road over the coming years, I'd really love to see us explore new ways to work with OHSU. You know, the work they're doing in terms of creating jobs and making a difference in people's lives. I just wonder, as we look at our long-term business plan as an organization, if there's not more ways we can work together. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I just want to express PDC's thanks to the Zidell family for the incredible legacy that I think you're going to leave for this city. Thank you. So, next item on the agenda, information item number 8, update on Centennial Mills and a request for a PDC board recommendation on next steps. Report 17-06. Will Tier is here to update us.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Will Thier, Project Manager for Centennial Mills. Today I'll be providing an update on the demolition status, as well as asking for feedback about the direction of future redevelopment. As the demolition comes to an end and the site is again accessible and usable, the question before us becomes whether to move forward with a full site redevelopment or whether to re-tenant remaining buildings with the site's previous tenant, the Police Mounted Patrol Unit, MPU. PDC's efforts to selectively demolish the site's most dangerous buildings is now coming to a close. Demolition of the final building is underway, and we expect the project to be wrapping up mid-March. By several different metrics, this demolition project has been a huge success. Our contractor, Northwest Demolition, and consultants like KLK Consulting and KPFF engineers have performed exceptionally, along with PDC project staff such as Wendy Wilcox, recently retired Steve Blank and Irene Bowers, Bruce Wood, and Lisa Boif. This was 100% a team effort, and I'd like to acknowledge everyone's hard work over the past couple of years. In addition to coming in over $2 million under contract, we'll have completed the demolition of 10 interconnected buildings with no major safety accidents, salvaged numerous historic artifacts and materials for future reuse, made repairs to the flour mill in preparation for renovation, and completed a cleanup of the Willamette Riverbank that was lauded by the Department of Environmental Quality in a recent letter. Once again, I want to thank everybody involved. So, what's next? Staff has developed 2 scenarios that bracket the realm of possibilities. The future lies down one of these 2 paths, with the governing difference being the presence or absence of the MPU. With demolition complete, there is an opportunity to redevelop the north end of the site while still accommodating the return of the MPU. In this concept, the flour mill would be renovated into creative office and connected to a new residential building. Because of the site's restricted dimensions and its distance from public transit corridors, mechanical systems would be needed to provide adequate parking solutions. Public access to the Greenway Trail could be provided between the flour mill and the MPU building. Now, pulling back, the full site concept includes the flour mill project just shown, plus 2 additional residential buildings. The stepped back appearance of the buildings is a factor of city requirements, and the programming was devised to show maximum development value. Of note, this concept provides an opportunity for increased public access and public open space. When comparing the public benefits of the 2 scenarios, several observations jump out. The full site concept would provide 5 times the number of affordable units in relation to the impending inclusionary zoning laws that are expected to go into effect. It would provide over twice the amount of activated ground floor space, 20,000 square feet of public open space, and 3 times the amount of contracting opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. In both cases, restoration and reuse of the iconic flour mill is a major priority for both PDC and the community. With regard to the financial impacts to the overall River District budget, there are significant differences between the 2 ends of the development spectrum. In the case of the partial redevelopment concept, the project would not be able to bear the full costs of site infrastructure like the Greenway Trail, public access easement, and NATO Parkway streetscape improvements. Staff assessed that the resulting financial gap would exceed $5 million. In order to enable this scenario, that gap would need to be filled by remaining project funds. On the other hand, a full site redevelopment would be able to bear the costs of site infrastructure while also creating nearly $10 million of residual land value. The differential, nearly $15 million, is essentially the opportunity cost of returning the Mounted Patrol Unit to the site. So, what questions need to be resolved in order to move development forward? Because the decision regarding the MPU is a decision that affects a city agency, Staff will be visiting City Council on March 22nd to request direction on the matter. Once a decision has been reached, staff will then take the appropriate steps to further the project goals. For example, in the event the full site development is chosen, a further decision regarding the legal structure of the disposition and development would be required. Staff met with members of the Pearl District Neighborhood Association last night to discuss both the decision regarding the MPU as well as overall investment priorities for the district. Members agreed that tenanting the MPU is not the highest and best use of the site. However, members also raised several concerns with the concept of maximum development. Their concerns included privatization of the waterfront, lack of access to the water, and the need to maximize and activate public open spaces. Their preference would be to use value gained from full site redevelopment to fund high-quality amenities on and around the site. Next steps for the site include completion of the demolition project, finalizing agreements with state agencies, and beginning Tanner Creek remediation work required by DEQ. In terms of public process, staff will present the board's recommendation to City Council on March 22nd. Depending on the direction received, staff will initiate the disposition process thereafter. Once that process is complete, staff expects to return to the board with terms for either partial or full disposition of the site. What recommendation would the board like staff to bring to City Council next month? And I think we have some testimony from members of the community.
I think we probably want to take that testimony and we'll talk further. So we have David Dysert from the Pearl District Neighborhood Association. David? We don't have, do we have anybody else?
Good afternoon. David Dysert, Pearl District Neighborhood Association. Probably don't need to rehash the history of this site, the unfortunate promises that have not come to fruition. However, we still have the opportunity to fulfill some of those promises. And I think the key three would be a significant public open space that is activated with uses that will activate that open space, and a direct access to the river. This is clearly a goal of the city. We're spending an enormous amount of money to clean up the river. And the last presentation that we had with the South Waterfront, the Zidell Yards, shows the power of the connection to the water. And we really need to do that here. It's a terrible missed opportunity. If we just privatize this waterfront with more residential development, it's such a missed opportunity. So the three things really I think we need to focus on: a connection to the site. The bridge from Fields Park across Nato Parkway is very critical to connecting this site with the city and the neighborhood. An activated, significant public open space, and direct connection to the water. We recognize the MPU is not the highest and best use of this value, or this land, but we request that that value generated from the removal of the MPU be used to fulfill some of the promises of this regional, significant, historic site. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, I think we're being asked to make a recommendation, so we'll need to do that. I've got some wording here. Will, you're going to come back up? We have questions for Will.
What's the remediation of Tanner Creek involved? I mean, what's the contaminant?
So there's some contamination surrounding the pipe that Tanner Creek flows within. And so we're currently looking into methodologies for how you would remediate that to prevent it from continuing to run down the outer pipe and into the river. So it's been there for a long time, since before we took access to the site. And so.
Is there any opportunity to daylight Tanner there at all?
It's fairly deep in the ground where it comes, you know, as it steps back from the river. I know people have looked at that in the past. I can always get you some information on past feasibility studies on that.
The two options that you showed really are kind of preliminary options, aren't they, to give an idea for what might be possible at the site and to show the potential opportunity cost, right?
That's right.
So the ultimate development could be markedly different from what's displayed at this time and could indeed reflect some of the concerns or address some of the concerns that are raised by the neighborhood association, I assume.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And how would that sequence work then? The further development of the site and further conceptualization of how it might work will come in later stages, correct?
Right. Once we go to City Council and we have resolution on whether the MPU is returning, then I think staff would put together some form of a solicitation that would likely have many of these elements within the solicitation as development requirements that would then be incorporated into a development contract, you know, a binding agreement between the developer and PDC, where they would then be required to provide, you know, some of these amenities.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is along the same lines that, you know, you were at the neighborhood association meeting and understand, I think, some of their goals. Are we going to be able to be responsive and still have it be a financially successful?
Yes, I think so. I think that with the $5.5 million that are remaining in our project budget, plus potentially another $10 million of unlocked land value, that provides the opportunity to either increase the quality of the amenities that would be incorporated into a development or add additional amenities such as a pedestrian bridge or perhaps direct water access.
May I add on to that? So, you know, I want to make clear that the River District budget has some constraints, and so I don't want to overpromise and to suggest that were we to have those resources that we could then deliver the open space that's contemplated, not because it's not desired, but because we have an impact to the anticipated returns on the post office because of inclusionary housing, and so there will be some constraints there. I think we also need to have conversations with the Parks Bureau about their willingness and interest in operating a park at this site. You know, we've heard a lot of interest in having high-quality, affordable housing and mixed-income housing, and so I think we want to have a conversation once City Council determines what would need to go there, or rather whether the MPU will come. I think there's a discussion about what role PDC wants to play ourselves in the development, and then what will be the kinds of uses. The Pearl District Neighborhood Association and our community partners will certainly be at the table before we go out for any solicitation, but I think we really need to do we need to consider what might be most appropriate, and we would be doing that with you all.
But I want to go back to Tom's question. I mean, you're asking us for a recommendation today, and the question that was posed was, you know, you got some good input from the community themselves, and I guess the real question for me would be, how do you fully or reasonably integrate some of the community's suggestions while considering the constraints of the budget and considering what's pragmatic and realistic. I'm not prepared to say whether or not a full site redevelopment or partial site redevelopment is appropriate at this point today. I mean, I'm not prepared to make that recommendation personally to you today. I think that there's still some more information that I would like.
And what types of information would be needed?
Can you answer that question that was just posed?
Mm-hmm.
That you haven't been able to fully answer that question. Is there still some things that still need to be considered? Or at least I haven't heard an answer to the question.
Okay.
Well, so I want to help if I can to address it. So I think at this point we know what the development parameters are, right? So in the analysis that GBD did for us, they basically built out the site, and what you have rendered here is if the site were fully built out, right? What it would be at highest capacity. So we can, as a board and as staff, make a determination that we would accept less than that for, you know, if we were to have a partnership, that we would accept a lower level of development or a lower level of return back. And so through the solicitation process, we would need to make those trade-offs. Like, we're willing to take less for the property, right, in order to have that open space. And so we can describe what that impact would be financially, but I think that's part of the consideration. And
if I understand the presentation correctly, is it accurate to say that if we did the partial redevelopment, there's no budget for any of those items?
That's right.
And if we did the full site development, we have potentially some budget left to expend and try to satisfy some of those?
That's right.
Correct, potentially.
That's right. There would be the $5.5 million that are remaining in the budget, plus whatever land value were received. But, you know, but to Kimberly's point, obviously that would need to be a conversation that we have with bureau partners, as well as additional follow-up conversations with the community, you know, to talk to them about what the trade-offs are that they're, you know, that they're prepared to accept. So
I've got some wording here that I'll put forth and see if we can go forward with that. This would be our recommendation, that the PDC board recommends pursuing a full site development scenario for Centennial Mills site, given its potential for more robust public benefits and additional resources to invest in other River District urban renewal area initiatives. Does that work? You bet you can. You know, I just have to say, from a person who lives on the river, that connectivity to the river that I heard mentioned would be wonderful at that site. And that may mean, I don't know, a dock where people could come and go with boats and canoes and kayaks. Something fairly simple could fulfill that in a way that would be pretty special.
right, there are some significant cost challenges with providing river access on the site, but
you know, I don't think we have
something that can be explored.
We don't have to limit ourselves to the idea that it just has to be funding from us for something like that too. Right. Are we good with that wording? Got a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second from one of these two. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for getting some good input from the Neighborhood Association, and
thanks.
It would be lovely to someday have this project moving. We are adjourned.